120 Iranian ballistic missiles launched simultaneously toward U.S. bases across the Middle East, and America's response erases Iran's entire air defense network in 47 minutes. Tuesday, 2:09 a.m., the Strait of Hormuz. Darkness over black water. 5 U.S. Navy destroyers running in a staggered formation, Aegis radars sweeping in overlapping arcs, tracking everything within 550 kilometers. They had been at elevated alert for 11 days. The intelligence picture had been building. Fragmented signals, satellite imagery showing unusual activity at Iranian rocket force launch sites, intercepted communications that suggested a window was opening. The destroyers were ready, or as ready as any force can be, for a simultaneous 120 missile salvo launched from 4 separate Iranian provinces in under 90 seconds. At 2:09 a.m., the Aegis SPY-1D radar aboard USS Donald Cook detected the first launch signature, a ballistic missile climbing from Khuzestan province, southwest Iran. Then 3 more, then 11 simultaneously. Then the tracking system's launch count ticker stopped being useful because the numbers were moving too fast. The tactical action officer aboard Donald Cook had one job in that moment: push the threat picture to every Aegis ship in the formation, to the E-3 Century AWACS orbiting at 29,000 feet 180 kilometers west, and to the Patriot PAC-3 batteries defending Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE, and Ain al-Assad in Iraq. The data link transmitted in 1.8 seconds. Every system on the network saw what Donald Cook saw, simultaneously. That data link, Link 16, the encrypted tactical communications backbone shared by every NATO and partner nation platform in the region, is one of the least glamorous and most decisive military technologies on the modern battlefield. It turned 5 destroyers into one integrated weapon system with 500 vertical launch cells. 120 missiles in the air, 47 minutes to impact on the nearest target. The clock was running. Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, the largest and most diverse in the Middle East, had been built over 3 decades of sanctions, indigenous development, and selective technology transfer from North Korea and China. The Shahab-3, the Ghadar-1, the Imad, the Khorramshahr, ranges from 1,300 to 2,000 kilometers. Circular error probables ranging from 500 meters for the older variants down to 30 meters for the most modern GPS and inertial guidance-equipped versions. Iran had fired ballistic missiles at targets before, at ISIS positions in Syria in 2017 and 2018, at Ain al-Assad Air Base in Iraq in January 2020, but never 120 in a single coordinated salvo, never against active U.S. air defense systems at full alert, never against a threat network that had been watching them for 11 days. What Iran's planners had calculated was saturation. The theory was mathematically sound on paper. If you launch more missiles than the defender has interceptors, some will get through. The Patriot PAC-3 battery defending Al Udeid carried 16 ready interceptors per fire unit. 3 batteries meant 48 interceptors for the most valuable target in the region, a base hosting 10,000 personnel, and the forward headquarters of U.S. Air Force's Central Command. If Iran could put 20 missiles on a single trajectory toward Al Udeid, the math suggested that at least 4 would penetrate. 4 Khorramshahr warheads, each carrying 750 kilograms of high explosive, landing inside a base perimeter, would kill hundreds and disable flight operations for weeks. The theory was sound. The execution was catastrophic. What's your assessment? Type A if you believe Iran's saturation strategy was fundamentally correct, but failed due to U.S. technology superiority. Type C if you believe the strategy was flawed from the start, that no ballistic missile campaign can succeed against a fully networked Aegis Patriot defense. Leave your full tactical analysis in the comments. What Iran's planners had not fully modeled was the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, THAAD, positioned at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, 480 kilometers from Tehran's primary target cluster. THAAD does not intercept ballistic missiles in their terminal phase, diving at steep angles toward their targets. It intercepts them in the descent phase, still 150 kilometers from impact, traveling at 2.5 kilometers per second before they complete their terminal maneuver. A single THAAD battery carries 48 interceptor missiles. 2 batteries at Prince Sultan meant 96 intercepts available against the high arc trajectories that constituted 60% of Iran's 120 missile salvo. The intercept geometry was favorable. The THAAD radar, the ANTPY-2 with a range of 1,000 kilometers, had been tracking every Iranian launch from the first second. By the time the missiles reached peak altitude, THAAD batteries had already computed intercept solutions for 71 of the 120 inbound tracks. 51 interceptors launched in the first wave, 44 kills confirmed. The 7 misses were re-engaged by the Aegis network as the missiles descended toward the terminal phase. 3 more killed. 4 reached Patriot engagement envelopes. All 4 were killed. Of the original 120 Iranian missiles, 0 reached their targets. 0. The saturation math had assumed individual systems defending independently. The networked architecture, THAAD handing off to Aegis, handing off to Patriot in a seamless, layered sequence, was not in Iran's modeling. The American response began before the last Iranian missile was intercepted. Subscribe and hit the bell. Operational breakdowns this detailed are here every week. At 2:31 a.m., 22 minutes after the Iranian launch and 25 minutes before the last interceptor fired, the first wave of American strikes was already airborne. 6 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers that had been orbiting in a holding pattern over the Arabian Sea since 11 p.m. the previous evening turned northeast. Each B-2 carried 16 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators. The 30,000-pound bunker-busting bomb designed specifically to defeat hardened underground facilities. Their targets, the Fordow fuel enrichment plant, buried 90 meters beneath a mountain near Qom, the Natanz underground centrifuge facility, the Parchin military complex, the Imam Ali missile base in Kermanshah, the facility that had launched the largest share of the 120 missile salvo. These were not targets of opportunity. These were the top of a pre-planned strike package that U.S. Central Command had refined over 4 years of deliberate targeting work. The coordinates were loaded. The routes were pre-flown in simulation. The B-2 crews had rehearsed this mission profile 48 times. Simultaneously, 154 Tomahawk Block V cruise missiles launched from USS Florida and USS Michigan. 2 Ohio-class guided missile submarines operating from undisclosed positions in the Arabian Sea and the Red Sea, respectively. Their targets, Iran's integrated air defense system. Specifically, the S-300 PMU-2 batteries Iran had purchased from Russia in 2016, positioned at 12 sites across the country, and the indigenously developed Bavar 373 long-range systems that Iran's defense ministry had publicly claimed could match the S-400. The Tomahawks flew nap-of-the-earth profiles at 550 kilometers per hour, terrain following at 100 feet altitude, completely invisible to the search radars looking for high-altitude threats. They arrived at their targets from multiple directions simultaneously. A timing sequence pre-calculated to ensure that no Iranian radar operator could engage one Tomahawk without accepting that 3 others were arriving from different vectors in the next 4 seconds. Iran's air defense radar network went offline in sequential nodes over a 14-minute window beginning at 3:02 a.m. Not all at once, sequentially, like circuit breakers tripping in order. Each radar site that went dark removed the coverage umbrella, protecting the next site in the network. By 3:16 a.m., Iran's integrated air defense system had been reduced to isolated point defense batteries operating without central coordination. Individual S-300 batteries attempted to engage the incoming Tomahawks autonomously. Without the network feeding them, targeting data from adjacent radars, they were operating blind beyond their own organic sensor range of 300 kilometers. Of 154 Tomahawks launched, 141 reached their targets. 13 were intercepted or malfunctioned. 141 strikes on 12 air defense sites in 14 minutes. What would you have ordered as Iran's supreme military commander at 3:16 a.m.? When your air defense network has just collapsed, your missile sites are being struck, and you have no communication with 6 of your 12 300 battery commanders? Activate every remaining coastal defense system and attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz? disperse remaining Air Force assets to civilian airfields to preserve them, or attempt a direct engagement of U.S. naval assets with what remains of your anti-ship missile inventory? Leave your decision in the comments. Every option carries catastrophic risk. Iran's naval response came at 3:44 a.m. 47 Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy fast attack craft, Bogomar speedboats and Paykap-class missile boats surged from Bandar Abbas and Keshem Island into the Strait of Hormuz. Each Paykap carried 2 C-802 anti-ship missiles, subsonic, sea-skimming, with a 120-kilometer range and a 165-kilogram warhead. The IRGCN doctrine for strait operations had been developed over 20 years. Swarm tactics, mass, speed, overwhelmed the close-in defenses of U.S. warships with simultaneous attacks from multiple vectors at close range. In war games, in Iranian military exercises, in public statements by IRGCN commanders, this approach was described as the Islamic Republic's asymmetric answer to American naval power. The strait was their kill box. The swarm was their weapon. The P-8 Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft that had been orbiting the strait since 10:00 p.m. had been tracking every Iranian vessel in the harbor since they started their engines. The moment the fast attack craft cleared the harbor entrance, their positions, headings, and speeds were transmitted to the Aegis network, to the carrier strike group centered on USS Gerald R. Ford operating 340 kilometers southeast, and to the FA-18 Super Hornet strike packages already climbing to launch altitude from the Ford's flight deck. 47 boats, 41 AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles launched from FA-18s in the first 2 minutes of the engagement. 33 boats destroyed before they reached launch range for their C-802s. 14 launched their missiles. 12 C-802s were intercepted by the Phalanx CIWS systems and CRAM launchers on U.S. destroyers. 2 hit the supply vessel USNS Joshua Humphreys, operating 60 kilometers south of the main formation. She did not sink. She burned for 3 hours and was taken under tow. By 4:56 a.m., 47 minutes after the last Iranian missile was intercepted, the operational picture had inverted completely. Iran had launched 120 ballistic missiles. 0 had hit their targets. 47 naval vessels had sortied. 33 were destroyed. The air defense network covering 80% of Iranian territory had been dismantled by Tomahawk strikes. B-2 bombers were still inbound toward hardened underground targets. And the USS Gerald R. Ford strike group, 12 ships, 90 aircraft, 6,000 sailors, was turning northwest toward the Gulf at flank speed. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 21 million barrels of oil transit every day, representing 21% of global petroleum consumption, was effectively closed, not by Iranian mines or Iranian missiles, but by the presence of a U.S. carrier strike group operating offensive control of the waterway. Oil markets, opening in Asia 4 hours later, registered a 34% price spike in the first 30 minutes of trading. Every economy on Earth felt the 47 minutes of combat that had unfolded in the pre-dawn dark. The deeper reckoning is about what deterrence costs when it fails. Iran's military planning had operated for 2 decades on a set of assumptions about American willingness to absorb a first strike without escalating to full-spectrum response. Those assumptions were built on the 2020 Ain al-Assad strike, which killed 0 Americans and produced no kinetic response beyond the THAAD intercepts. They were built on a reading of American political tolerance for sustained Middle East conflict that had been accurate for years. They were built on the belief that a 120-missile salvo, large enough to represent a genuine escalation, but not large enough to constitute an existential threat, would produce negotiations, not a 154 Tomahawk counter. They were wrong, and the cost of that miscalculation was measured in destroyed infrastructure, a gutted naval force, and an air defense network that took 15 years and $8 billion to build, eliminated in 14 minutes. The technology gap that defined this engagement is not closing fast enough for Iran's timeline. The Aegis-THAAD-Patriot layered network represents 40 years of continuous American investment in integrated missile defense. The B-2's stealth and the GBU-57's penetration capability represent specific engineering solutions to specific Iranian hardening strategies. The data link architecture that made 5 destroyers function as one integrated system is the product of a defense industrial ecosystem that Iran cannot replicate through indigenous development or foreign purchase under current sanctions. Iran can build more missiles. It cannot build the network to defeat the network that defeated its missiles. The Strait remains the world's most critical choke point. The underwater geography does not change. The oil dependency does not change. The strategic logic that makes Iran's geography simultaneously a source of leverage and a source of vulnerability does not change. What changed at 2:09 a.m. on a Tuesday is the operational calculation of every military planner in every country watching about what a first strike costs when the defender is networked, alert, and pre-delegated to respond. Was Iran's 120 missile saturation strategy the right concept executed against the wrong defensive architecture? Or was any Iranian first strike strategy against a fully networked U.S. defense fundamentally unwinnable from the moment the launch order was given? What does the 47-minute outcome mean for every other nation currently building ballistic missile arsenals as a deterrent to American power? And how does the closure of the Strait of Hormuz reshape a global economy that assumed this corridor was permanently open? If this breakdown is the level of analysis you want more of, like the video, subscribe, and drop your tactical assessment in the comments. The next scenario is already being built. The 47 minutes between Iran's launch order and the last American intercept will be studied in every war college, every missile defense program, and every deterrence theory seminar for the next generation. Not because the outcome was surprising to the analysts who had wargamed this scenario for years, but because of what it revealed about the gap between a nation's belief in its own capabilities and the actual performance of those capabilities under contested real-world conditions. Iran's Revolutionary Guard commanders had watched their own exercises. They had seen their missiles strike targets accurately in training environments. They had calculated the intercept mathematics against isolated, independent defensive systems. None of those inputs prepared them for the networked, pre-positioned, pre-delegated response architecture that processed 120 inbound tracks simultaneously and returned a zero-penetration result. The exercise environment lies to you. The battlefield does not. The USNS Joshua Humphreys, burning in the southern Arabian Sea, is the only American vessel that sustained damage in a 47-minute exchange that launched 274 weapons and destroyed or disabled 33 Iranian naval vessels, 12 air defense sites, and every ballistic missile Iran committed to the fight. She will be repaired. She will return to service. The Iranian vessels at the bottom of the strait will not. The radar sites reduced to smoking concrete will require years and billions to rebuild, under sanctions that tightened the moment the first missile left Iranian soil. The strategic arithmetic of the 47 minutes does not improve for Iran with time or analysis. It calcifies into a permanent data point about the cost of miscalculating American network architecture, American prepositioning, and American willingness to respond at scale when the threshold is crossed. History has a pattern. The nations that study it carefully arm themselves with accurate assumptions. The nations that study only their own exercises arm themselves with comfortable ones. At 2:09 a.m. on a Tuesday, the difference between those two approaches was measured in 47 minutes and one burning supply ship.